So everybody, this is Bryan, and this is episode number 4, Tribute to My Grandpa. And I'm excited to share with you a couple stories and get to the point, but I also invite friends and family, my grandpa, my grandma, Brooksby. If you know something that I don't know, please share. Please respond or let me know where I've made a mistake. Because obviously I'm putting these stories out there with my perspective on what I've heard from my grandparents, especially my grandpa. And so let me give you a brief, very short, a couple minutes overview of my grandpa's early life anyways. He grew up in Fredonia, Arizona. My grandma grew up in Kanab, Utah, which are just 8 miles apart, right up there, northern Arizona and southern Utah. And my grandpa, at a very young age, he was taking care of sheep. They had tons and tons of sheep on this ranch that they had out there. And so they took care of them. And my grandpa, at an early age, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, progressively, he was out there longer and longer for periods of, weeks or months at a time by himself taking care of the sheep, which I think has been pretty impressive. I think we trust our youth far less than we actually should. Not that I'm saying we need to have them by themselves over, weeks at a time, but I am saying that we don't give the youth today the service that our past generations did to be able to learn on their own. But anyways, I digress a little bit on that. My grandpa, I don't know when it was, but he knew he didn't want to stay in Fredonia. And he always had these big visions for himself to do something grander, to be something better and bigger. And that is a trait that I feel like I share with my grandpa and really appreciate that about him. And so I don't know when it was, but I know that he didn't want to be there very long term. And so this week I want to share with you a poem that my grandpa wrote about my grandmother. And I just love the pair of them. They shared the same birthday, years apart, but they shared the same birthday, and so they had a lot of fun together. And I'm really impressed with just my grandpa wanting to get out of Fredonia, the little small town life, and do something big with his life. Now, he has some fun in this poem, you'll hear him actually say these words as he repeats his poem. But I think it's impressive what he did. And this is a poem that he shared at my grandmother's funeral 5.5 years ago. And I thought it was sweet and tender, even though there's a lot of humor in it. And I really appreciate that. But my grandpa was an impressive man. And one of the things I learned recently that I thought was just really, really neat, maybe I thought it was, is when my grandpa got married, my grandpa, they loaded stuff up in the back of whatever they were driving. I'm assuming it's a truck, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Someone correct me on that. But picked up my grandma. This is all arranged. It wasn't like it was like a shotgun wedding or anything, but picked up my grandma, got all her stuff packed in the car and everything, say goodbye, and they drove to Flagstaff, Arizona, and to get married. And they drove by themselves, there was no one else there looking for the justice of the peace. And he was out hunting at the time, and so they couldn't get married. And so they drove to Sedona, and that justice of the peace wasn't even in town. So they went back to Flagstaff, and they waited at the guy's house. I'm leaving out lots of details, but waited at the guy's house, and he finally married him at 11 p.m. in his home, I think it was. But I thought that was just intriguing. So my grandpa had some adventures with my grandma, and I thought that was really cool. So enjoy this poem that is about my grandma and her life. And so I think you'll find some enjoyment in this one. So listen up and pay attention to my grandpa here. You're going to like this one.
This is Verdon's life, her version. She was born in a corner of heaven, where the country is really quite hilly, where the weather is ever so pleasant, never too hot or too chilly. In autumn the trees turn all colors, in winter some light snow and ice. In springtime all nature is budding, the summers are always quite nice. She grew to a lovely young lady in that town where it's ever so pleasant, but those were the days of long, long ago, and now we must turn to the present. She knew if she stayed there in heaven she'd wind up a cowboy's wife, and although she worshipped her cowboy dad, she didn't want that kind of life. She fell for a man with ambition, with a college degree to his name. He wanted to live in the city and hopefully gain wealth and fame. They married and moved south to Mesa, where the first Christmas felt just like summer. Early springtime was really quite fine, but the summer was really a bummer. They often fought scorpions and spiders. They suffered from sunstroke and thirst. They found they had moved to the devil's playground. Hell's own heat could not have been worse. Each day the sun would shine hotter and hotter and hotter yet. It felt like they lived in an oven. Even Satan was breaking a sweat. She thought they would soon rise above it and move to a pleasanter place. But weeks turned to months, and months went to years, and they never did leave that rat race. Now they've lived 60 years in this oven, and she always has been the good wife. She knows that she'll end up in heaven, for she's lived in hell her old married life.